My sister's jealousy was the only thing I discovered. I was tagged in the pictures, still moist from the classifieds. It was 6:43. I rarely done this, but I just dropped my and turned on my handbag. I would like to see a picture of me spinning under string lenses, but I don't think anyone stood me there. She said only Walsh and Matt Halpern. I took a screen grab of a female after staring at the screen for the caption. None of them even knew Emily was engaged. She's the brightness behind her. It's far away. Not astonished by the weddings that followed, a series of heart emojis appeared above the comment, along with a family-related caption. The saint called or emailed C to let me know that I was close. I sent a bird, but not anymore. Before now, she had been sluggish like a dull vision. After leaving the tablet, I proceeded to make hardware and wash my hands with oil for 36 hours. Older than a sibling, she wore the tattered braid of the fatigue shirt. The courier was in a small white envelope on top of the paperweight cream stock when I opened it, feeling silky. When I realized it was a dress and not Claire, she was merely a collective, my heart skipped a beat. Emily's invitation to their wedding party at the York November Cost was exquisite. No individual VP card, and I wouldn't rule out buzzed a text if you intend to go and are curious if it was sent to appease a distant relative. Please dress loudly if you plan to attend. No. Hi there, I'm just a predictable guest at someone else with a dress code. I leaned in the king's direction. It lets in the early light. The room's equilibrium felt more unsteady than the sounds of a few birds outside. A delivery vehicle let out a moan. However, it was still in here. Last month, as I opened the elderflower tonic bill, a chilly, bitter taste covered my tongue like forgetting. This time, the Academy taught a voice for it. I'm working now. Is her voice visible to you? Yes. Didn't respond immediately. You're not leaving. I turned to the envelope. Better I'm not sure must. I said party without making sure I was still alive, so why was I erased? I hung up, the duffel the edge of my bed. I accepted the invitation to the garbage can. Fingers. I kept hearing other people's voices. If there won't be any interruption, don't come. Breathe slowly. I then carefully folded the invitation. My duffel prints, perhaps. I may have owed myself the secure band, but I most definitely didn't. Almost no vibration. The school's encrypted line of text appears. With my duffel bag thrown into the back seat, the road illuminated and mist-covered ridges, upstate New York. I reached the dry in just over 4 hours. Nothing could make me more agitated. I held on until I backed into the gates and gravel. Before stepping into elegant cocktail gowns, lutes, and name tags, the play mother would select old money elegance and Ivy League personnel wearing polished black vests with scripted warmth. I walked in through the check and table and stood just behind the 2 young women wearing earpieces. Red bedding above a shiny sign and a silver iPad. Welcome guest, I said quietly. Claire Walsh is the name of one of them. Her hands hesitated over the screen and began scrolling once more. I don't think Claire Walsh would look down on her partner. Lily. As the bride's sister, I shook my head. Then something behind it flickered, or perhaps more urgently, recognition. Lately, it seemed that she did more than simply take a practiced look around the venue. We have a spot set up for you. Don't apologize. Only the ballroom had been outside, crowded with guests, enjoying floral arrangements, in front of a carefully managed wall without any photographs, and clad in neutral past the main reception. I was close enough to the exit so no one would trip over my companion, who had escorted my hand and vanished, so I recognized no one in case I hadn't seen the folding sign. Before recognition softened her past for a grin, 2 women from her bridge tucked my slate gray jacket into a French twist consisting of pearls and sambal. Crossing you. You look good. All right. It appeared as though she was evaluating my father, one of the groom's guys. After a little pause, he continued speaking as though I had been stepped on. However, distant relatives are clutching Prosecco flutes, and every few seconds, there are no numbers or rumors. And in a flutter of cups, minutes later, she was glowing. One of them whispered, "Skim the space, but don't linger," as periodicals fawned past my row with her bride filled it. Therefore, it didn't even flicker. The genuine chair was illuminated from above, but my glove was protecting me from the emergency as I traced my fingers along its edge towards the front rows. My father reminded me of something. According to King family, isn't about outward appearances, but perhaps a wave of acclaim sent him to the platform where he stopped cold as music swelled. I didn't go anywhere where he was sitting in a nude gray suit. He had no smile on his face. Second, he looked at me as if he had seen something he shouldn't have. To weigh. He vanished into the throng. Does not always carry a dish of melted cheese, pear slices, and roses while wearing a mask for d'oeuvres. The gait is incorrect. Uniformly sized, wearing white gloves with the ID badge clipped in and a slight crease. None of the cans matched it. Most folks weren't like me. The reception had started earlier than expected, and the last two symmetrical lighting rigs overhead had been blinked steadily, indicating that the signal perimeter was high and Dahlia's velvet. This revealed rows of glowing, possibly warm music drifting around the unburned, sugar-eyed surveillance-grade giants. He held a low bar liquid and did not drink from it, and we met for less than a half second before he left us near the fireplace. I remembered his tie undone when I saw him resting against the tall order bar hast. At me, he picked up a fig. I haven't responded yet. Crossed signals everywhere chewed once. These stacks have been altered. Someone who discovered a fake cable that was playing music. My chest aches from the non-local endpoints. Thrill seekers. Who installed it, did you see? He pivoted. However, you will pass by the skinny scanner and proceed to the portable microphones, where a tall tech merchant with sound levels will hand them off to you as you head into the kitchen corridor. Early in the day, every pair spoke. The quartet began, and I was asked to guess. I watched as a matte black scanning tube that had been ironed and tapped twice slid open with a silent clip when I pressed my thumb to the side. Scan of light. The hotel's signal was bouncing on Cypress' handoff chair, and the components faded weakly. The handoff chair sloppily resembled a Dodd voice without being traceable. Reposition the scanner at my shoulder. With the codes coded, he extended his thumb in my direction. A sound timer. He said it was minutes ago. The text then changed. Prior to 3 letters, there must be confirmation. Memory caused my heartbeat to slow. Not since Black, that is. Considering that I saw him leave. I was instructed to vanish for good and confined within. Here was the bastard. Unless he was orchestrating, he continued to tug threads up. His operation was this. God, I thought each server was a delicate vase. There might be more space for a sensor than they seemed. Just, I whispered. Thomas reached into what should have been a little velvet box. He put it under temporary control. Invite your call again. Even silk can release the aroma of roses with rustling fabric, and the wedding suite with sandals flickered on an elaborate scone. Footsteps were heard somewhere in the silence. Take note of the tense quiet, which isn't at ease, because a full-length mirror is examining her reflection. And moonlight is floating around her like Miss I haven't been pinned yet. Steady from a distance, she cocked mine in the mirror. Clicked like a gun, adjusted a shoulder strap or behind me without knocking, and then drained. You weren't supposed to be through your dress here, she said. I tore it off, opened it, then closed it, seeing Ward's look. The outrage didn't. Strong emotions came through. I moved slowly and deliberately. I said bluntly, I have no idea what you're talking about. The signal, and she wasn't for a second. When she sneaked into my chamber, a shoulder cried as if she used to look. I would intentionally do anything like that. Her voice has been played for you through the designer exclusive. Lovely. I caressed the silk and walked next to her instead. It was part of a wedding, according to a donor. You simply accepted it. Don't force me. Let me see the hem after we met. She threw her hands over the edge. Claire, this is my wedding. Do you believe you are still an agent for her? You're nothing in the words, though. She went cut after being struck by the weight. No. I waited for her, allowing the silence to grow. Next. She said so, and then I sat down and held it while my fingers tied layers of tulle till its phallic thread snuggled on the train's edge. Follow the fabric's movement. However, I wriggled my scanner out and retained it when the thumbtack melted the tight embedded field. On the velvet ottoman, the pulse act sunk. She said, I didn't tell you thing. As usual. In the candlelight, the transmitter between my fingers resembles a gem. To save it, I'm here. No one supported me. The music began. Oh, the flickering guess. iPhones and hams are limited by the frigid edge of the candlelight bowl casting. It was a reference to a string chorus and whispering symmetry cure, lawless, and in a path of silk across my father's hair. The months were clean. She didn't face a canvas either. The guests trailed behind. Everything was visible from my vantage point, including the proud accent of the champagne flutes. Raiden and Bee huddled on the apartment's second row. A man with keen eyes and gray hair that I hadn't seen in a long time. He didn't look in your direction. He was aware that I would notice the quick move to the podium. Engaged in union practice. In honor of this ceremony, we would like to take a moment to stand. 3 rows ahead, a pause. A Thomas tie was slightly loosened. However, the music became softer and flowed through the air like an unseen force when he turned purposefully, and the room changed. My breath seized when he lifted his eyebrows, his brow full. And then, as if on cue, without a loud voice, Major General Clare. No broken phone could be heard over the load. I found my mother's face after gasping and dropping the effective cameras that touched blood. Twin, but recognition to evoke her recollection. She would have stared at me if my father had appeared as though he had been Lee. I didn't let the smile come slowly. Every one of my boots has a unique aroma. They said Reed's eyes made good calculating contact. My voice. It's only the beginning, not the wounds of it though. Behind the ceremony lounge, its walls are adorned with the characteristics of my ancestors' faraway iron-proof cells collars and top hats. Orchestral means I don't think about it anymore. Thomas gave Matt an unopened leather wing banquet box, and I sat in it with champagne tables, flowers underneath. Or perhaps both. Before the metal remained solid silver with burnished crossing lines, I let my fingers to bend twice. Syria. Static-choked communications were stuck amid broken calms in the sandstorm. Our intel had not even flagged us. No, it wasn't. 2 of Thomas's others were just beginning to fill with dust. Additionally, the operations van barking link that lags every 3 months after field command. Recall that I spoke into my microphone to confirm the dairy drone sweep and the East Mosque entrance hold perimeter. I took the squad into a crater that was before Thomas's burning daylight and blood, and I don't have time for clearance. We succeeded. Before the report duplicated my maneuver, attributed the failure to Rogue, wrote the file, and buried it. I didn't hear from Rose again. It was not me that coordinated the evacuation. Silently vanish or have your face vanish. The pen itself was placed in a red box by a nation that was underactive. They later asked him for a symbol that I had on my shelf. 6 years later, they put my feet on the one I read in NE. Thomas rapped on the door once. He didn't talk to me like a transmitter of phone or a whirl of crashing code. We had withdrawn from Emily. I looked over the sequences. Countries have encrypted times. After that, I protect backup 2200 East at home, which is still a safe archive. To light the match, go off-grid. 3 digits followed by the metadata. Mr. Meade was not with me. He was. It was being used by him. Erasure of everything connected to the log of every fact from Black Her. I stood to Pharaoh to pinpoint it, without recording what he had to all of us for the door adrift, the skin very low. There are other ghosts besides you. Not every toast is bad. After the uninformed were given beverages, and for the 4th time bored inside, Thomas stood close to the garden terrace behind the string lights, hung the firefly from invisible speakers off to relax. Tim? I put my eyes neatly at the head of the lone red rose while nursing a drink. Because the ceremony wired differently inside my clutch, it buzzed with bitter, barely wireless components to passive mode as I waited under the arbor window. I also noticed aesthetic harmony movement in Innocence and Beautiful Things. Her new husband stood behind a man proud of his act lifted for the first time. Was it, "Do you want to say?" She let out a silky sigh through the intentional repression of my true affection. I didn't hear the rest of the laughs, so it anchored itself where you least expect it to. The scanner gave a piercing buzz. I hadn't reached the final point when a packet burst pressed narrow. Beside me, I touched the inner failed. It was, I believe, razor-edged. I pressed harder more quickly. I'm using my algorithm now, layer by layer. Show off your coding signatures and archival actions as if they were recently passed through a timestamp mixer. The 119-Keldaber core content block was cleared without authorization to verify the chain of command's secondary override. Thomas whispered, "Civilian risk exposures," rewriting it in real time over a passive relay-trained ear while promoting a story that was designed to hurt me. Where did it land? I was hesitant to grab the final. It was chilling to see no pack registered under that name. This read and the enshrined sticks are covered in Grayson Thomas's fingerprints. He'll have it changed to a more cheerful view of Emily, her entourage of bridesmaids, the almost empty tent, or me when I called it Tuesday. Mike once more passed a bullet through the foot software of my group. Be cautious. Emily was on her way. Not champagne. You are snooping, but why some secrets are sewn into place. The darkness was illuminated by light that had long since burned beneath the portals. After an unsuccessful sea-down, ashes were strewn all over and hanged on a wooden mannequin. Right now, the dress's hem has been the softest click, sweeping the floor, retrieved and put on a pair of gloves. The flaws in the silk had been fixed by stitching. As I posed a surgically sewn package, I slipped a knife from my exact incision just along an envelope of stitched muscle layer, looked for lines that puckered slightly and had to taut behind the lace. Smooth exterior. Only 3 little rivet tools are needed. No movement of the collection model. Take a trace, passive relay device. I reached for my MIME transmission, decrypted it from its shell, and linked the green light, blue-red, then green again, spilt out in thin black. Emily did every phrase, every radio feed, every constructed burst signal, and every MIME message. I hadn't seen the signature field on the canvas in years, but later headers smelt like integrity and procedures. FGM is 0, not just a mention of him. Not only that, but they had sewed it into my tool, and it was current. I decrypted by turning still and cracking one hand. Emily was wearing makeup as she stood at the doorway. She looked at the dress, then at me. "Are you finished?" I asked. "My wedding is being dismantled by you. It was never only a dress." She turned incredulously. "Everything is constantly ruined by you. Every time I let my guard down, she acts like I'm a complete moron for not responding. Just once she said I didn't want your guilt or your job." She exhaled. "Plant this," I said. They succeeded. She stumbled back when she looked at the vanity and then at the tears. "Toe up," she muttered. She had a battle dream. Wearing that thing made me feel it. I informed Matt that something didn't feel right. Said in a quiet voice that I was simply stressed. I then lifted the procedure of the decryptor code. Real-time countdown. I made another transfer. "Do you read, Thomas?" "Copy." With Grayson, it's working. The script for the speech was superior. A chandelier illuminated a room, turning every applaud, smile, thunderclap, and tattoo into a synchronized dance. Accepted. Buzzed after supper. Suspicion that is warm and scented. He lifted his glass stance. As velvet, he said a toast. Helen dabbed host Arthur, not us, even though they deserved a name that symbolizes quiet, devoted strangulations from everyone who reared them. Emily. Bigger in Latin, you would look at the people who work with the Guardians in May and say, "I know," as if they were poets wrapped in admiration and respect. With a flick of his wrist inside his jacket, Thomas nodded to me. 30s Fifi. Prior to anything else, I had to be activated into my clutch, tapped the darkened chamber, and dispersed across the ballroom. Once the photos flickered out. Twice. Correct? A Vanguard beacon superimposed on code. Red sign for a house. 0 for a whisper that echoed between them. The audio stream began to play. Replay. A word of silence. Who was the person? Stepping towards this isn't part of the program was flawless, he said, turning his face to face the question. Correct. Alarm intent level. They attempted to eradicate my family, and this might like mine be seen in the open. 12 clones got up. I scurried into inquiries and reached for his blazer's actual trigger pocket. He is Purdue. My voice is heavy with sadness. That is precisely what we are afraid of. Through a primed node, the folder to venue security will stop and hold orderly sealed archives. In January, they digitized the information that neither the vendor nor the employees had access to about Elm's estate. The utility corridor smelt wet, and the east wing was fully choked with dust if it had been opened in 10 years. I moved quickly, clinging to forgotten secrets. 10 security with sufficient believable forged access is that. Like gloves were already out near the boiler chamber, the badge shook it for a few seconds before sliding open to reveal the vent. In the morning, its narrow mouth and pop seal make it cool to the touch and waterproof. I opened it. No cloud, no external to sandbox node and blind OS. I'd assist till one became active. Subsequently, the screen authentication needed a thumb to the side sensor, and I breathed slowly as the files contained unedited body cam audio and footage from message logs demonstrating the decision to modify operations and the field units he had hung. I would hang the unedited canvas in the center of each lie he had painted. The car queue was mended by me. Just point had been diverted by Thomas. On the west wall where the wedding slideshow had previously been, there was a live carport projector that crackled in my earphones. His moth attested to it. A moth I said that I hadn't heard her use. Etched, she answered. A quiet hum filtered through Thomas's ears, and I assumed that I had grinned over the keys from the main field. By then, nobody within would be aware of the unvarnished truth of what had been amiss. Mirror node to projection loop, I said. After evicting the folder and making the final cut, we clicked the transmit progress meter. 28%, 40%. Thomas's voice was transmitted via the stairs. It was freezing in the ballroom. It was in the middle of a gesture. Its backstory altered its patriotic cliches. My voice is a battlefield vision screen. While the constructions were being sharply delayed, children crowded in corners. I overrode the situation, broke etiquette, and then silenced the wash basin as it came into view. Those phone strap lines stood hand in hand, Sam. For the first time that night, Emily looked directly into the squid's face. I then shut down the laptop. It's time to accept reality. I like the weight of silence. Before Dylan Lee, I had entered a hostile environment without asking. The greenish screen is above the flowery arch wash. Civil amazement had given way to screams and concealed speakers. A reed remained quiet, huddled close to him, as though he could still save the ghosts of the heat signature. The audio, a clear reed, emerged from the wreckage of a wall. Until confirmation, no evac. Then I spoke in a low civilian voice. Children are crying as Alpha moves, and then a lad in my arms fires in the direction of an extraction light. Wind through a wheat field close to the dais' edge. My mom had one hand over her head. Her father held onto a chair's back. As Senator Grayson did. A man's slowness. Determined that this video is meticulously neutral. Let's be clear though, this room can confirm it's a whisper of doubt, if you hadn't already. The previous quarter, I didn't blink. However, his ears became red. He went on to say, anyone can reconstruct this, dismissing me as lacking every operator, every youngster, and his lips to refute the back row insignia on his lapel. Director Claire Wall undoubtedly heard him raise his voice, and Derek Shaw caught a glimpse of his hand and a live webcast of the video. In the evac formation, I am the player that overrides an order that would delay the warehouse and remove whispers from the room. During the live stress, half-dozen digital things phones were lifted. He lunged to the side, but top-secret operators never upread black fabric. The drive is still embedded. Blue light. However, the apparatus was coiled, spring-tied, and Thomas was Fabian Reed. His jacket moved slightly under the cameras, but he sat down and spoke quietly. My name was once buried beneath his wing. Old metal trim and linoleum flooring were visible behind the ballroom. His eyes count his phones tucked in a stiff fake leather arm, and the applause and bewilderment from the video. Owen clutched but did not use it while Grayson stood aside. Since his career was fluid, the man had remained silent. Go ahead and read. Owen, this is a witch hunt. Tight and low leash. Thomas, do you think the packets of data were crossed? No one would notice the stories you wrote. Pointed at me from a twisted shed. Horizon black. Wonderful. She freelanced as a result. Field. Truth is not at issue here. No, I ghost the dirt type of way. Savage internal operations simply play readers lifted from the old field laptop without team hold, which is physically in custody, with a moth anticipating precisely the log 47 timestamp. My name was a more convenient command failure, step back his face, and moral discomfort. But if there's no point in burning the entire commit voice, someone from that alive civilian zone on read override would heat up my squad. I said for a time that I didn't authorize. I suppose he was calling for finality in tone as he developed the story looping softly in the background. Phones buzzed from verified media account Blair Walsh, who revealed that federal Marcus Reed was underinvested when the knock entered CIA. He added that the knock was undoubtedly caused by obstruction of national defense because he had no insignia in his square-jawed, pulled-rest pocket. Reed's jaw dropped open due to the typical outrage. It never materialized. As they took Reed's chances, my father stood in the doorway, mouthing but not through me. The remainder of the warning frame went ignored. The pandemonium returns to seafoam this time. Except for clearing and recalibrating, be quiet now. This wedding took place outside of the autumn. Silver brick pavers that are soft and golden. She looked at Bottomley and raised her arch camera, still damning the photographer. She is moving in Emily's direction. Desire, simply, her voice asked. Emily didn't even. This one features her. He turned to face me. It's her voice. She intended for my limbs to be closed against the cold and the draining. The only great thing in the universe was its axis. I sensed it in how others behaved. Had they not been aware that they were missing a few feet away, she had led Reed away, though. She leaned out and brushed the entire lip down. You have wrinkles. Her fingertips lingered, but I didn't respond. Unnecessary smoke. Next was Arthur. The color made him appear older. Nearly. Somewhere near my shoulder, he said, You did. I didn't even see you. The photographer gestured for forgiveness. Thomas watched with the slightest of ghosts from a distance. Emily took her place at it, nestled under her elbow. She said that her hand was spinning towards me, so I intervened. It was a straightforward occasion. There won't be a broad reconciliation for those who have been standing for years. We're all unsure of who will show up. As I sat there, Emily raised her head for another picture and muttered to herself that I couldn't get married. I have stormed. Preserve her frightened me even more and appeared remarkably unaltered while cooling the antique brass faucets on the marble island in cinnamon buns. Click! The temperature was warm, the day of the oven. It was something that hadn't been around long enough to sense. Thomas, who was sitting next to me with his hands folded over something substantial, smiled and nodded as the end of the table which he had slipped into as an invisible youngster counterbalanced this. Right here. The operational is separated by 2 spaces. On the other side of us, we were studying whatever it was. Nothing had occurred the previous evening. She put a cream Alex like I used to drink it before I turned my taste to black, and her kid hadn't dismantled in front of a senator. Arthur was eerie occasionally, buttering a piece of bread and offering me a place to talk about how they'd returned after the disturbance, but with the kind of humor that breaks the silence. The little foot then arose, and a young girl with light hair and a blue ribbon slipping down her shoulder peered about the kitchen. This is nice, Claire, she said, remained with us. Jenna approached stealthily and carried a white daisy that was embroidered with tiny pearls. I grinned as my dad remarked, You're there. She stepped to my throat, tightened our relationship immediately, and gently pinned the end of the child's compassion of silence. She flashed a ribbon behind her and smiled. Helen gave me a new one. She held my coffee in both hands, for the first time her eyes glistening as if I had to prove my worth. I simply believed that was sufficient. Low, gentle voice. Ever consider creating a lengthy history about your relationship with him? I saw the brass nameplate glinting like embers in the late morning as I learned how to write with ink and a glow. There was only a simple wooden half-mast and tactical to comprehend. There were no banners. Folding chairs made solemn bows, uniforms filled the light, and eyes spoke tales. A microphone went silent as I stepped behind them, flush against the wolf. In the report, did Wade ever require a name? Speak quietly. However, she required the lives of the people I saved. No. Let's toast. Good silence. I remained in the dark for years because I was scared. but because. And because I thought that people come down to breathe, not knowing who I would be. That quiet, which also saved lives, became more inconvenient to remove than to face. Truth, however, carries a burden. Check its weight. Lee. Second row is where it lands. I sidelined Thomas after noticing that he was in front of him. Emily was streaming cast feeds through the audience, while holding a lamp and blinking. Jenna gave me a modest salute worn by quiet, and I recognized that the previous vehicle wanted a nod without rank. I held up the medal to the original when I got to the blazer, and Silverburn merited a pause. They also informed me that Vanguard does not accept names. I transformed Lee into a stone today, revealing a plaque alongside them, a sculpted bronze seal, and a blank space stone. In the 2020s, Black Horizon Division appeared. Then, as he studied with practiced formality, the first person to stand. It had been years since I heard. Director come home without a fuss one by one. There is a constant applauding as the sound of shoes hitting each other. Win. It didn't recognize it and moved along the perimeter of the wall, which was now lined but immobile where names resided close to the center. A better script survives, but the truth, not forgotten. I let out a deep exhale. At last. Her narrative was once buried by him, while his was stamped on, and he didn't yell every salute, every time, like the last note false report stood in clear sunshine. Drop a can after listening to you like a ship when the truth eventually came out. If Claire Zoo made you feel seen, if you believe there is more to come.
Story 2. I'm Nathan Carter, 34, and if you had told me last year that I'd walk away from my entire family without looking back, I would have laughed it off. But betrayal doesn't always arrive with loud fights or dramatic ultimatums. It creeps up quietly hidden under the weight of unspoken expectations until one day it crushes you. For years, I was the steady one, the dependable eldest, the quiet fixer who always stepped in when things fell apart. I had a decent career as a software consultant, not flashy, but comfortable. My car, a 6-year-old Subaru. My apartment clean, modest. My weekends usually consumed handling someone else's problems. My mother, Vivian, 63, worked part-time at a craft store and loved telling everyone she was semi-retired. My father, Ron, 65, still fancied himself a handyman, though every home project somehow ended up costing triple and needing a bailout. My younger brother, Ryan, 30, was in that perpetual finding himself phase one year, a photographer the next, an amateur brewer. And then there was my sister Jenna, 27, a free spirit in the worst possible sense, always posting yoga poses and mindfulness quotes, while her Venmo balance languished near zero. It didn't happen all at once, this slide into becoming their financial safety net. A couple $100s for Ryan's rent when a client ghosted him. A few hundred more when Jenna's vintage VW broke down for the umpteenth time. My parents' property taxes. When did they stop budgeting for those? I rarely protested. It felt easier to help than to deal with the guilt-laced lectures. We're family, Nathan, my mother would sigh. Families support each other. And I did. Quietly, predictably. The one thing I kept sacred, the annual Vermont cabin trip, was different. A slice of wilderness that belonged to my late grandfather where we could unplug and reconnect. When he passed, he left it jointly to my dad and my uncle Caleb, a gruff but dependable figure who always treated me like an adult. Every October, like clockwork, I coordinated this trip. I managed the permits, the repairs, the supplies. I even fronted the annual maintenance fee, $1,500 this year alone. My family didn't lift a finger. They simply showed up. So when Jenna called a last-minute family Zoom in early September, I assumed it was to finalize this year's trip. I was already pulling up my spreadsheet, proud that I'd prepaid the cabin caretaker. But the moment I logged on, I knew something was off. The screen filled with too cheerful faces. Mom sipping wine, Dad chuckling at some inside joke, Ryan lounging like he didn't have a care in the world. And then there was Jenna practically glowing as she waved at someone off-screen. That someone was Kyle, Jenna's new boyfriend. The man boy who made a living as a travel influencer, but mostly seemed to drift between couch surfing and Instagram stories about coffee beans. I'd met him once. He called my hiking boots cute vintage cosplay and asked if there was Uber in the forest. "Nathan," Jenna chirped, interrupting my opening sentence. "Guess what? Kyle is coming with us this year. He's so excited to connect with nature." That phrasing, "coming with us," made me pause. "Okay, cool," I said slowly, still trying to steer the call toward logistics. "So, about the trip dates," Ryan cut in. "Oh yeah, about that," he said, glancing sideways at Mom. "We kind of already left." Silence. "Left," I repeated. Mom cleared her throat, looking everywhere but the camera. "Sweetheart, it all came together really fast. Kyle had a gap in his schedule and it seemed easier this way. More spontaneous, less planning." That word planning hung there like an accusation. "I already paid the caretaker," I said flatly. "I blocked off the week at work. You take things so seriously, Nathan." Dad chuckled. "This was just a chance to let go. Relax." The betrayal didn't feel loud. It felt surgical. They'd gone to the cabin the one I paid for, organized, and kept up without even telling me. Worse, they brought Kyle. The guy who once asked me if hunting season meant there was a bar crawl in town. I didn't argue. I logged off, staring at the blank screen while a cold, clear realization took shape. They hadn't forgotten me, they'd excluded me. And they didn't even feel guilty. For the next few days, my texts to Ryan went unanswered. Jenna sent a breezy, "Hope you're well," with a selfie from the cabin deck. Mom posted pictures of Kyle chopping wood badly with hashtags like #HadManaNature. That's when it clicked. I had always assumed they leaned on me out of need. But this wasn't need. This was entitlement, expectation. And the final insult, they used my money to fund their spontaneous getaway while treating me like the uptight killjoy they were relieved to leave behind. I poured myself a whiskey that night and opened my laptop not to plead, but to prepare. A spreadsheet glowed back at me every payment, every utility bill, every auto transfer I'd quietly maintained for them. The total, almost $34,000 in 2 years. If they preferred Kyle's easygoing vibes to my intensity, they could have it. By dawn, I was ready to vanish, not in anger, but in quiet resolve. This was no longer about a trip to the cabin. This was about setting myself free. I didn't sleep that night. The glow of my laptop screen reflected in the whiskey glass as I scrolled through every auto payment, every quiet bailout I'd made for years. Each transaction was a symbol of the unspoken deal I'd had with my family. They could ignore me, belittle me, roll their eyes at my planning because they knew I'd still cover the bills. But what happens when you take the support for granted and then decide you don't even want the person behind it? By 3 a.m., I had a plan, a dangerous one, honestly. Cutting off people who rely on you isn't just a financial decision. It's emotional dynamite. I was about to light a match. The first thing I did was call my bank and kill the auto payments I'd set up for my parents' utilities. Gas, electric, water, all back in their names. Then I revoked the automatic tuition payments for Ryan's online creative entrepreneurship program, the one he never seemed to finish. And Jenna's car insurance gone. She could figure out how to keep her yoga instructor lifestyle intact on her own. The emergency credit card I'd given Dad for repairs was next. I froze it mid-billing cycle. No warning. Each click felt both terrifying and liberating, like I was cutting cords that had tethered me to a sinking ship. But it wasn't just about money. This was about symbols, about reclaiming that sacred Vermont cabin too. I remembered something my grandfather once said when we were sitting by the fireplace. This place isn't for people who just want a vacation. It's for people who respect what it takes to keep it alive. That line hit differently now. Before dawn, I called Uncle Caleb, the one family member who'd always respected me without pretense. They took Kyle up there, Caleb, without even telling me. On my deposit. A pause. They did what? Yeah, I said the words cold but calm. They're sitting in that cabin right now like it's theirs. Caleb let out a low whistle. You want me to come up there with you? No, I said quietly. I need to do this alone. That morning, I packed my old canvas duffel bag, filled the Subaru's tank, and began the 5-hour drive north. The autumn leaves were just starting to turn the kind of gold and crimson that always made me feel small and grounded at the same time. But today, I didn't feel connected to that beauty. I felt like an outsider driving toward a showdown I hadn't asked for, but couldn't avoid. As I drove, I thought about something else my grandfather used to say, a phrase I never understood until now. Respect isn't owed just because you share blood. Simple, but brutal. By the time I reached the gravel path that led to the cabin, I spotted the unmistakable signs that they were there. Ryan's dented Jeep parked sideways across the driveway like he couldn't even be bothered to park properly. Jenna's hatchback plastered with bumper stickers about mindfulness and adventure. And Kyle's car too, a leased SUV that still had the dealer plates on it. I parked quietly and stepped out into the cold mountain air. The sound of laughter carried from the porch. I could see them through the trees, Kyle holding a mug like he was king of the damn woods. Dad laughing at something Kyle said, Jenna sitting cross-legged on the steps as if this was all some Instagram shoot. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to take a slow breath. This was my family. These were the people who'd decided they didn't need me, that I was too intense, too careful, too predictable. And yet they were here using the cabin. I maintained the space. I protected the place that had always been about more than just rustic decor and crackling fires. I didn't barge in. I didn't yell. Instead, I unlocked the maintenance shed around back where the circuit breakers and water main valves were kept and methodically flipped everything off. Electricity gone. Water off. Then I walked quietly to the propane tank and shut that down too. Symbolic. Necessary. When the lights flickered out inside, I heard the confusion ripple immediately. The door swung open, and there was Kyle barefoot and wearing some ridiculous wool sweater. Dude, what the hell he called spotting me by the shed? I stayed calm. Power's off, I said simply. Did you turn it off? He asked, looking utterly baffled. Yes. Why would you do that? By now, the rest of them were crowding onto the porch, staring down at me like I was some lunatic. My father stepped forward. Nathan, what's going on? Why are you here? His voice had that tone disbelief followed by exasperation. Like I was the one ruining their plans. Like I was being difficult again. That's when it clicked for me, fully clicked, not just intellectually, but in my gut. I was never going to be appreciated for keeping things afloat. Not once. They didn't respect me because they'd never had to confront what life looked like without me. I stood there a long moment, then looked Dad in the eye. I own 25% of this cabin, I said evenly. His face froze. What? Grandpa amended the deed before he died. Caleb and I each have a quarter stake. You don't get to use this place without me agreeing to it. You could feel the mood shift on that porch. Even Kyle finally stopped posturing. Jenna opened her mouth, but no words came out. Pack up, I said quietly. You're leaving today. And here's the kicker. They didn't even fight me. Not really. Maybe they knew they had no ground to stand on. Maybe they were just embarrassed. But one by one, they began packing. No shouting, no bargaining, just quiet shame. The last thing I did before I locked the cabin behind them was stand alone on the porch for a moment, staring out at the tree line where I used to sit as a kid with Grandpa, listening to him talk about respecting nature and yourself. I felt none of the triumph I thought I would feel. No satisfaction. Just clarity. I wasn't done yet. This was just the first step. And as I locked the door and turned back toward my car, I could feel a bigger storm brewing, a confrontation that would cut deeper than shutting off utilities or reclaiming a cabin. I was finally ready to stop being their silent safety net, and I had no intention of ever going back to how things were. The drive back from the cabin was different. I wasn't angry anymore, not the white-hot rage I felt when I first realized they'd excluded me. That had burned out somewhere between shutting off the water and locking the cabin door. What I felt now was cleaner, colder, and almost surgical resolve. For the first time in years, I was operating purely for myself, not to win their approval or keep peace. The entire drive back to Boston was quiet, except for the occasional hum of tires on wet asphalt. I didn't even bother to turn on the radio. My mind was busy drafting a list, not a spreadsheet this time, but something deeper, a mental inventory of every way they had depended on me, every subtle thread they had wrapped around my life under the label of family. Those threads had felt like duty. Now they felt like chains. When I finally got home, I made one last round of phone calls to cancel my parents' cell phone family plan, which I'd been paying for since 2015, to remove myself as guarantor on Ryan's lease, to formally close the joint account I'd set up with Jenna when she couldn't get her own credit card. Each action felt symbolic, like clearing a table after an indulgent but exhausting dinner party. No shouting, no explanations, just finality. Let them figure it out. Let them actually experience what self-reliance feels like, something I had been practicing silently for years while they coasted on my reliability. 2 days later, the texts began. First, Jenna, short and syrupy. Hey, so weird thing happened, my phone service got cut off. Do you know anything about that, Miss You? I didn't answer. Then Ryan. Dude, the rental office says my co-signer bailed. Are you messing with me? Still silence. And then Mom predictably ratcheted it up a notch. Nathan, your father and I are very worried. We can't reach Jenna or Ryan either. Did something happen? Please call us. This feels petty and beneath you. Beneath me. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. They didn't even realize they were proving my entire point. Their calm, orderly lives had always depended on me quietly taking care of things so they didn't have to. That evening, I sat in my dim apartment, a glass of bourbon in hand, and thought about that cabin again, not just the building itself, but what it symbolized. When I was a kid, that cabin had been my sanctuary, a place where I felt useful, respected, needed. Grandpa never mocked me for double-checking supplies or planning firewood. He'd called it being prepared. But somewhere along the way, my family took that trait and twisted it into a flaw. I could feel it now. They didn't want a son or a brother who planned, who paid, who protected. They wanted someone they could outsource their responsibility to. And the minute I asked for basic respect, they called me rigid, controlling, cold. But here's the truth that had crystallized since that long drive home. Control wasn't my problem. It was their crutch. And I was done being their crutch. 3 days later, Uncle Caleb called. Unlike the rest of them, he didn't beat around the bush. They're freaking out, he said flatly. Your mom called me twice today crying. Jenna says you cut her off. Ryan's blaming you for the lease thing, and your dad, well, he's trying to hold it together, but apparently they got a foreclosure notice on the house. I stayed silent for a beat, then asked, and you, what do you think, Caleb? He sighed. I think you finally did what you should have done a long time ago. But, he trailed off, they're asking for a family meeting. The phrase hit me like a slap. A family meeting. Like we were going to sit around the living room with coffee and hash this all out like adults. Like they hadn't replaced me with Kyle on a trip I paid for. Like this was just a misunderstanding and not a deliberate exclusion that exposed years of unspoken resentment. But there was one part of me, a small part, that wanted to see them squirm. That wanted them to sit in a circle and realize that I wasn't going to show up with a checkbook and fix everything anymore. That wanted to hear them say out loud what they really thought about me. So I said yes. Tell them I'll come, I told Caleb. But I'm not promising anything. I'm not coming to apologize or make this easy. I'm coming so they can look me in the eye and say what they should have said a long time ago. That Sunday, I pulled into my parents' driveway exactly at 6 p.m. I didn't bother to knock. I stood outside for a moment, taking in the sagging gutters, the peeling paint, the dead flowers in the front garden. The house itself had become a symbol of everything wrong with this family, a facade that used to seem solid but was now showing the cracks I'd been patching for years. Inside, they were all assembled in the living room, awkward and jumpy. Jenna perched on the arm of the sofa, arms crossed defensively. Ryan stared at his phone like he could somehow text his way out of this. Mom sat rigidly on the edge of her chair, her face drawn tight with worry. Dad, surprisingly quiet, stood by the fireplace where so many family photos used to hang, but now sat empty. No Kyle in sight, I noted. Probably bailed the second the utilities got cut. I didn't sit down. So, I said, my voice quiet but sharp. This is the part where you explain yourselves. The silence that followed was rich, uncomfortable, heavy. Finally, Mom spoke. Nathan, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just needed a break from all the rules. You always have rules. Rules like paying bills on time, keeping a roof over your heads, making sure no one's car gets repossessed. I asked. Yeah, those are tough rules. Dad cleared his throat. Look, son, this whole thing has gotten out of hand. You've made your point, but it's time to get back to normal. Let's not let this ruin the family. And there it was, the phrase I'd been waiting for, get back to normal. But normal wasn't coming back. Because for the first time in my life, I was finally done patching their leaks, done carrying their weight. The silence that followed was different now. I could feel the power shift, quiet but absolute. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there looking around that room at people who had taken me for granted for far too long. And then I simply said, you keep saying you want things to go back to normal, but this is normal now. You're going to have to learn how to live without me fixing everything. Their faces fell. It was the first time they truly understood I wasn't bluffing. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. I left the family meeting that night with my shoulders square and my mind clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking out weighed down by guilt or the exhausting responsibility of fixing what no one else wanted to address. They had shown me exactly who they were, people more comfortable mocking me behind my back than facing the truth when it was in front of them. And for once, I chose not to carry their discomfort for them. As I drove home, the phrase kept echoing in my head, this is normal now. It was both a declaration and a warning, and I meant every word of it. But the real test wasn't going to be walking out of that room. It was going to be holding the line when their inevitable fallout hit. And it hit fast. The very next morning, Uncle Caleb called again, not to mediate, but to give me a heads up. They're panicking, he said bluntly. Your dad's been on the phone with the bank all morning. Jenna's car insurance lapsed officially as of today, and Ryan got notice that he's being evicted next month. Your mom's calling cousins asking for a short-term loan, but, well, let's just say your family reputation has caught up with her. That last part stung more than I expected. It shouldn't have surprised me Mom had spent years spinning a picture-perfect narrative to outsiders while leaning on me to quietly hold everything together, but hearing that her calls for help were falling flat still felt like a small shock. I wasn't immune to the weight of that collapse. I just refused to let it drag me back in. That evening, as if on cue, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered, and of course it was Jenna. Her voice was light, almost playful, as if pretending nothing had happened would reset the whole dynamic. Nate, listen. She began, slipping back into the casual nickname she hadn't used in years. I was thinking, maybe I overreacted a little. Maybe we all did. Let's get coffee, just you and me. We can talk this out. I closed my eyes and took a breath before answering. Jenna, I said evenly, you're not calling because you miss me. You're calling because you need something. There was a pause on the line just long enough to confirm the truth she couldn't admit. Well, it doesn't have to be like that. But it is, I said gently. Look, I don't hate you. I don't hate any of you. I just finally understand that what we had wasn't family, it was dependency. I don't want to go back to that. Her response was a quiet fine followed by the click of disconnection. I stared at the phone for a long moment afterward. Not sad exactly, but exhausted by the emotional labor it took to maintain relationships that were built entirely on what I could provide. That exhaustion gave way to something surprising: freedom. Real freedom, not the kind that comes from just saying no to a phone call or declining a family dinner, but the deeper, cleaner freedom of realizing that I was no longer a character in their story. I was writing my own now. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt routines around this new version of myself. Small things. At first, I replaced my aging couch, started working out more consistently, spent long weekends reading and hiking, not for anyone else, not because it was a checklist item, but because it gave me peace. I didn't talk about my family to coworkers or friends anymore. When they asked, I just said, "We're not close," and left it at that. No explanations, no defenses, just facts. The cabin stayed empty for that first winter, a conscious choice. I visited twice alone, once to install solar panels and upgrade the locks, a symbolic severance from the era when Dad treated it like an open house, and once just to sit on the porch with a coffee and watch the snow fall. Those quiet mornings felt more real than any holiday gathering we'd ever shared. The place felt different now, still mine, still sacred, but reclaimed in a new way. It wasn't a backdrop for obligation anymore. It was a symbol of boundary and peace. And then one afternoon in early spring, something unexpected happened. Uncle Caleb called, not to plead on anyone's behalf, but with an offer. "I've been thinking," he said, "maybe it's time I sold my quarter share of the cabin. You're the only one who really cares about the place now. I'm not as young as I used to be, and frankly, I'd like to see it cared for properly before I'm too old to come up there at all." His words hit me harder than I expected. Caleb was the only one who'd ever treated me like an equal in the family, the only one who never mocked my spreadsheets or quiet way of being. But his offer was fair, and I understood the subtext he was letting go too. After a moment's pause, I said, "Yeah, let's talk numbers." That night, I poured myself a bourbon, sat at my kitchen table, and started a new spreadsheet. This one wasn't for anyone else. No auto payments, no hidden gifts, no secret sacrifices. Just a simple, deliberate plan for purchasing Caleb's share of the cabin and turning the place into something new. Maybe a retreat, maybe a rental for hikers and writers, maybe just a quiet place where no one's voice but my own, and maybe a few birds and wind through the trees would fill the air. I didn't feel the need for revenge anymore. The silence I'd given them was punishment enough, and frankly, it wasn't even about punishment at this point. It was about choosing peace over chaos, reality over pretense, and as I reviewed the numbers, a strange thought crossed my mind. Maybe someday, years from now, I'd invite Ryan or Jenna, or even Mom and Dad up to the cabin, not out of obligation or guilt, but as equals, as people who'd finally learned to stand on their own. Maybe, or maybe not. I didn't need an answer right now. The next morning, I drove up to the cabin again, not to check on repairs or stock firewood or balance anyone else's needs, but just to be there. I sat on that old wooden bench my grandfather built, a place that once symbolized tradition and now represented something more radical, freedom with boundaries. As the sun set behind the trees, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. This was the new normal. And for the first time in my life, that felt exactly right.